Hello and welcome to this edition of Potomac Local Live. I'm Uriah Kaiser, the publisher of Potomac Local. Joining me today is Kyle Allwine. He's the legislative director for the Fredericksburg Chamber of Commerce. Kyle, thanks for coming on the show today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
We know that transportation in this region is a big deal, right? And you guys just held a transportation summit at Mary Washington University, and you welcomed the likes of Rob Whitman, Congressman Rob Whitman, Doug Allen, the CEO of Virginia Railway Express. You had Stephen Birch from the Virginia Department of Transportation. When you bring in these sort of titans of transportation in our region, whether they're talking roads or rail, or in the case of Whitman, funding, right, to pay for all of this, that's a big deal. So I want to get a sense from you, how did it go and what they talk about?
Well, as always, transportation remains a top priority for us. Most people don't know, but we poll our membership every year to find out what their top priorities are that are impacting their business that they want us to advocate for them on and be their voice of business down in Richmond and in Washington, D.C. Transportation always tops the list. Over the next 5 years, VDOT and VRE and other groups they're investing about $1 billion in our road infrastructure here in the Fredericksburg area. But we actually have $4 billion of critical needs. And so when you look at that, you're like, wow, $1 billion, that's great. Yeah, but there are these overwhelming needs. Our region was just ranked about a year and a half ago as the worst traffic hotspot in all of North America. That's not something that we want to be known for from a business attraction standpoint, from a quality of life, especially when you have 60,000 Fredericksburg regional residents commuting north every day for work. That's a troublesome warning. So we hosted the Transportation Summit. We were so thrilled to have the speakers that we did. You were so right, titans of transportation. Earlier this year, Congressman Whitman wrote a letter to Speaker Pelosi asking her to make transportation funding a priority. And hopefully, fingers crossed, they're going to do that. At the end of the day, transportation funding is based on a foundation platform that is going to fail. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's based on the gas tax, and with the increase of electric fuel fleet vehicles as well as hybrid vehicles, and to be quite frank, the great progress that the United States has made in oil production, causing oil prices to drop, the gas tax is on its way out. And there's no other good, sustainable, and viable way to get transportation funding. SmartScale, about 4 years ago, started with $1.6 billion in funding for the entire state. That's now down to about $750 million in the latest round of SmartScale. We fare very well in SmartScale, but across the state, there were over $7 billion in needs last year submitted to SmartScale. So when you only have $750 million, that's quite the delta. So you have to compete with the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, improvements to 66 and 495. There's a lot of priorities across the state. So it was great to have experts in the room to talk about solutions.
SmartScale being that state program where jurisdictions will submit a list of wants, needs, whatever you want to call it, but they submit a list of projects, transportation projects, to the state, and the state will then score them through a rubric that they have to determine whether or not if the project were to move more people, whether or not the project is good for land use, and at the end of the scoring process, the state says which projects are to get funded. And what we've seen in this most recent round of SmartScale funding, this recent 6-year scale funding project, Stafford didn't do so hot. Prince William didn't do so hot. We saw some projects in Prince William on Interstate 95, where recently at a meeting in Fredericksburg they called 95 at the Occoquan the worst area on Interstate 95. SmartScale funding didn't go for that. The state has allocated money for it, but it didn't actually get paid for through smart scale. There was actually some sidewalk projects that actually ranked higher than a sidewalk project in Fairfax City actually ranked higher than the 95 project. And so you also mentioned the gas tax, right? We know taxes pay for all of this. In 2013, House Bill 2313 was passed. The gas tax was increased for the first time since 1986. But what you're saying now, despite the additional money for roads that was passed in 2013, and despite the fact that we have this smart scale weighting process now that goes through the state, this scientific process, you're saying that we're seeing fewer dollars for transportation for the Fredericksburg region.
Yes, I mean, overall across the state, this is what Smart Scale was designed at the end of the day, and it succeeded to increase the amount invested of the dollars available in transportation funding. And what I mean by that is that with every mile of road that's added in Virginia, we have to maintain that road. And as the increases in cost to maintain the state's current infrastructure have increased, the amount of funding available as well as the decline in the gas tax have caused a real issue in available funding for new projects. Well, when you're looking at new projects in Smart Scale, they've actually, with having local match, like with the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority and the one down in Hampton Roads, they can leverage local dollars and dollars from public-private partnerships. And the state's now taken that $750 million and made it $1.4 billion through that local leverage funding, the public-private partnerships. So they're getting more funding by doing it that way. But what they end up doing is it really puts areas like Fredericksburg, Richmond, other areas that are highly populated but don't have transportation authorities at risk because they don't have the funding at the local level in a coordinated regional effort to leverage it in the correct way to really maximize dollars in Smart Scale.
And you do point out that correctly, Hampton Roads does have a transportation authority, and so does Northern Virginia. However, the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority ends at Prince William County, right? Stafford, you cross that line, and that's it. They're kind of Stafford, Fredericksburg, Caroline, Spotsy. There's no such thing, right?
Yeah, and that's something that we've talked about. We've talked about with our legislators. We've talked about with the administration, Governor Northam's administration, is give localities and areas like the Fredericksburg region, the Richmond region, and even areas along I-81 before that deal was passed. Give us the opportunity, allow us, even though the Dillon rule exists, give regions at least the opportunity to form their own transportation authorities. Fredericksburg is at a real disservice because we're actually ranked in many of our roads and areas in the same category as Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads, but we don't have a transportation authority. So we think that there's a little bit of an issue there of not being able to compete with Hampton Roads being able to fund most of a $2 billion bridge tunnel with their transportation authority. They asked for the final $100 million from Smart Scale, and it's like, we don't have $2 billion to put towards our product. Yeah. How can we compete with this? And so a transportation authority may be a good option.
And I think it's important to point out that much like Smart Scale, right, with the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, localities within the jurisdictions, Prince William, Fairfax, Loudoun, Arlington, they also, just like Smart Scale, submit a list of projects to the Transportation Authority in hopes they can get some of that money, right? So there's state money from Smart Scale, and then there is money from the Transportation Authority that they may get. And so we've seen in Prince William County, we've seen money go to an expansion, Route 28, about $100 million, go to 28, which is a very congested corridor for people trying to commute from Point South into Loudoun County, across Manassas, across into Loudoun County to go up to the tech corridor there. We've also seen a lot of money from the NVTA go to Dumfries, right, to widen Route 1, because Route 1 runs parallel to 95, and the state wasn't. We've been talking about widening Route 1 in Dumfries since the late 1990s, and it wasn't until the creation of the Transportation Authority and the subsequent actual funding of the Transportation Authority, which again happened in 2013, did we actually get some money to actually do this project we've been talking about since the late 90s in Dumfries. So if the Fredericksburg region came together and had such a transportation authority, how do you think that would change things?
So it would change things quite a bit. So if Stafford, Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania, which are the only ones that are close to even qualifying under the current laws for a transportation authority, although they don't meet the population threshold that's currently set that allowed the Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia ones to be produced, they would, if they followed the same revenue model as the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, they could raise about $30 million in local funding for roads. Now, that $30 million you could then put into SmartScale and various projects and leverage that funding, and I would say probably qualify for at least doubling, if not tripling, that investment of those local leverage dollars. The other kicker, though, is local legislators are not a big fan of even working on I-95 because it's an interstate. So it's the state and or federal government's responsibility. That's fine. If that's your druthers, this transportation authority would also give you the opportunity. You mentioned sidewalks earlier. We just want better interchanges, safer stoplights and intersections, things like that. You could use that $30 million on important projects just locally, not even ones that necessarily impact directly I-95, but maybe take some traffic off of I-95. Of people commuting from, say, Spotsylvania to Quantico or areas like that, you could create some other paths and routes that could create redundancies that would lower congestion on the main arteries.
One of the things that we've been writing about here at Potomac Local for a good part of this year is the local government's willingness to talk about raising taxes in the form of a bond, a transportation bond, to improve roads. So in Prince William County, the voters in November will see the option for somewhere in the neighborhood of about $600 million to pay for interchanges on local roads. And in Stafford County, they're talking about a $50 to $70 million transportation bond that would go to improve some of the notorious two-lane roads, these rural roads that are in Stafford County. You know, you being at the chamber, you hearing from your membership, the business owners, I imagine that some of them, at least some of them, would say, look, if we can improve the roads here, our business could improve as well.
Yeah, I mean, to take it a step back, bonds are great, except they impact the debt capacity. So when counties are also looking at, like Stafford County, a new courthouse, a new high school, when they look at those and they're competing for debt capacity, the citizens are going to overwhelmingly say, no matter what, we want better schools. At the end of the day, they probably need a new courthouse. So you've got those competing projects with roads. And to be quite frank, a high school that can be completed in 2 years is a lot nicer for a supervisor to put in a feather in their cap than a 5 to 10 year project on a road. So you have a real issue with bonds, we feel like, from the potential of the impact on debt capacity. And that really makes it politically infeasible, whereas the transportation authority could really be an outlet to that doesn't impact debt capacity, but raises funds in a different way. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's really an opportunity for our businesses. In some cases, it's life and death. We have a local ambulatory service company that is a private ambulance company that has routes, and if they get stuck on 95 and they can't respond to a call, or they're transporting a patient that is in distress and they can't get there because it's too congested, or they've contributed to a wreck or whatever, that's bad for business. Mm-hmm. Plus, the other piece is, you had Amazon come to Arlington, which is fantastic. And every year we hear about business attraction in Virginia. How do we get more businesses to come to Virginia? We don't have really good data on why they say no. We have good data on why they say yes when they come here. We don't have good data on why they said no. It's kind of like if you did Tinder or something like that and you try to find out, why didn't you swipe right? Well, you can't find out. And so the big issue with businesses that don't come here is you don't get that feedback. But I imagine if you ask many of them, think about the ones that would be attracted to Virginia because of the asset of the Port of Virginia, the largest Atlantic-based seaport on the East Coast. As soon as they offload the goods there at the seaport, they're stuck in traffic. Mm-hmm. So it may be better for them to just go to Charleston or Baltimore or one of the other major ports on the East Coast, just based on the traffic.
So you bring up Amazon. I want to ask you: is anybody in Fredericksburg even talking about Amazon?
I wouldn't say that there's many people talking about it. They're excited about it, and I'm excited about it from the standpoint of it was an incredibly exciting opportunity and inventive and creative use of economic development incentives to improve the area in attracting Amazon. So you had the component about the funding for higher education and the funding for roads. I don't think anybody in the Fredericksburg area would complain about Governor Northam putting together a package like that for another company to improve the roads and higher education in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So from that perspective, we see it as a great model. And we also see it as a big win and a big plus to Virginia's economy that we got to spend $750 million, maybe even $1 billion, which is half of what New York was prepared to pay to receive Amazon's 25,000 equal number of jobs. I think that's a real testament to the value of businesses being in Virginia, that we're worth double what New York is.
And do you expect any, any benefits for the Fredericksburg region because Amazon will locate in Arlington? Or is there any discussion about the ancillary businesses that may sprout up to support the people who move here to work for Amazon?
I certainly think that more than anything, the Fredericksburg region, as it's always been primed, but maybe now there's more attention brought from other companies that may say, man, we never thought about Fredericksburg, Virginia, or Virginia in general being a home for our tech company. We always think about Silicon Valley or some of these other areas, and maybe they'll take a closer look at Virginia. But we already have many of the assets that businesses want, and we had them before Amazon came here. We have dark fiber connections. We have access to a great, well-educated workforce, and you have great access to two fantastic cities with Richmond and D.C. There's not a single other town like the Fredericksburg area that has proximity to two of the most important capitals, a state capital and the nation's capital, anywhere else in the United States. And so this is a perfect central nexus for a business to locate here. But back to your original question, there's not many people talking about, is Fredericksburg area directly going to benefit from Amazon? It's hard to tell. But I think at the end of the day, some of the ancillary opportunities that come with it will definitely improve our region.
Let me take us back now to the conference that you had at Mary Washington University back on July 31st. 95, obviously, that's everyone's favorite road. I say that wholeheartedly, and that's the thoroughfare that traverses the region, and it's congested, right? At any point in the time, weekday, weekends, you can expect to sit in traffic on that. But also at your event, you had VRE, Doug Allen, Virginia Railway Express, and we know that while this region does not have Washington D.C.'s Metro subway, we do have VRE, and a lot of people rely on it. It is commuter rail, and it's the state's only commuter rail. VRE has been talking for years about the bottleneck it has on its trains at the Long Bridge. This is a bridge that connects Washington, D.C. with Arlington, and the tracks narrow right there at the bridge that crosses the Potomac River, and this hampers their ability to provide more service. And I'm wondering what was talked about was this a topic at your July 31st transportation meeting?
Thank you so much for bringing that up, because it really is. We talk a lot about roads, and so a lot of times people say, well, there's other options. Yes, there are. There are some great options. We are big fans of multimodal transportation. Right now, VRE takes about one lane of I-95 off of I-95 every single day, and that's huge. The capacity that they could gain from the Long Bridge expansion is 3 lanes of I-95. So for us, that's huge, because that provides so many more opportunities for people to take a safer, cleaner, and more direct way to get to their office or their commuting location. It really opens up the opportunities for students at the University of Mary Washington and Germanna to go north for important internships in cybersecurity and other areas. It's a real welcome opportunity. But at $1.6 billion, it's a pretty hefty price tag. But when you consider that it takes off 3 whole lanes of I-95 in either direction that it's running, voters may say that's worth it. Right now, a typical person driving on the road, they get about 25 miles per gallon, which means with the current gas tax, they pay about 600th of a cent to drive 1 mile on I-95. Well, right now it's more expensive for them because some of them are paying for the Easy Pass and things like that. Well, if you flip it, they could just get a VRE ticket and not pay gas tax, not do any of that, and they can sleep, do work, whatever, gain some of their quality of life back by not being stuck in traffic. I think those are all huge bonuses to the VRE.
You know, one of the things that I will never forget is covering your chamber prior to the start of the Rappahannock Bridge project that's going on right now. I know that the Fredericksburg Chamber mobilized its members. It went to Capitol Hill. It talked to the lawmakers there, and I guess you guys did a successful door knocking campaign because through the Atlantic Gateway project, we now have 2 new bridges that are going up over the Rappahannock River on I-95, and your chamber took a lot of credit for that project, getting behind that and urging lawmakers to get behind that back when Terry McAuliffe was governor in Virginia. Looking forward, what projects is your chamber looking at now to try to get support or endorsing at this time?
We're endorsing a lot of projects, and we're always open to new solutions and new opportunities. We're very supportive of the Long Bridge expansion. We see that as a tremendous benefit to our region. Most people don't know, but CSX actually owns the lines themselves, and VRE and Amtrak rent space. So that's why they get kind of pushed over to the side in terms of priority. They're like, you know what? Why am I being delayed? Well, it's because somebody needs their bananas in New York, right? So there have to be other options though than just that. And right now we see expansion of the express lanes down past 126, which is the Massaponax exit in Spotsylvania. We see that as an important opportunity for us to not necessarily just kick the can down the road, but actually bring a true solution to those and a true terminus for those express lanes. Take them beyond the traffic. Take them beyond where they want to go. Take them beyond the next big stop of that. Because you and I have both driven on the roads. You get to the end and everything comes to a screeching halt, and everybody's trying to then reconvene and zipper back together. Well, if you can just kick that rate down, maybe even take it down past Richmond, think about the potential benefits for that. And it's a usage thing, right? People pay to use it. So they are, in essence, it's a usage tax on them being able to use it. So that's a true public-private partnership. Now, on the other hand, we would love to have an additional lane in Stafford. With the express lanes currently being there, that's actually not technically allowed in the contract. So we're encouraging our lawmakers to find any type of creative solution to that, because we certainly want to ease that Occoquan bottleneck. And then the last thing that we're always supportive of is more redundancy in our transportation network. Over the next 5 years, with that $1 billion of construction, you're going to see a lot of motorists and commuters actually rerouted through 1728, 301 through Maryland. These routes were never developed to handle that type of occupancy and capacity. But what if they were? You know, we have 495 in the Washington, D.C. area. What if we had a 495 in the Fredericksburg area that took people around and to closer areas like Culpeper and King George, Westmoreland counties, these areas that have the land? It's cheaper than the land, you know, going right through the heart of the city of Fredericksburg. It would also connect to other businesses, other economic development opportunities, other great site selection opportunities for new businesses. There's a lot of great opportunity in building redundancies in our transportation network. And of course, we'll always be supportive of the RTA and new funding measures as the Secretary of Transportation evaluates what's next after the gas tax. We'll be supportive of anything that's sustainable and viable.
You know, I think it's very interesting that you bring up the alternative routes because Deputy Transportation Secretary Nick Donahue at a meeting in Fredericksburg talking about I-95 was talking about the need to erect new signage on 95 near Richmond to sort of divert traffic over to 301, which runs sort of parallel to I-95, but it crosses the Potomac River at near Dahlgren and Colonial Beach and over into, I believe it's Charles County, and that would get some traffic out of our region and then put it over there. And I've been covering transportation a long time. That's the first time I've heard someone say that publicly, and a state official at that level. So that's interesting that you bring that up. Kyle, I really appreciate you joining us today on Potomac Local Live, and welcome you back anytime you want to talk about this or business or anything else that's affecting the membership of the Fredericksburg Chamber.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all that you do to educate your listeners and readers on the things that are going on in their backyard.